All right, good morning, everyone. I believe that's most of our participants online at this moment, as a few more are joining. So my name is Gustav Venter. I head up the Center for Sport Leadership at Marty Sport, and I'll be moderating this morning's session. Please just note that we are recording the session for wider circulation, so just be aware of that. I'm just going to repeat sort of the house rules at the beginning. So please mute your cameras and microphones at the outset. You can use these at the end when we have the question time. But for now, just to ensure a smooth user experience, please keep those on mute. And you can do that in the middle of, or in the main sort of options bar towards the bottom of your screen in the middle. You're also welcome to interact with us in the chat bar on the right-hand side, which is basically the conversation option again on that options bar. At this point, I would like to welcome a few guests. First of all, Ms. Nomsa Mashlangu, Senior Director of Sport at the University of Johannesburg. She's also President of USA and FASU, as well as member of the FISU Executive Committee. I'd like to welcome the directors and heads of sport of our other universities, local government representatives, sport managers, and administrators from the industry at large. And then finally, also a warm welcome to all our Marty Sport colleagues. It's a pleasure to welcome all of you, and we trust that you will enjoy an interactive session with us. The topic for today is an important one, transformational leadership in sport during times of uncertainty. And this is the first of a series of seminars as part of a broader initiative. In this regard, the USA Western Cape Heads of Sport are committed to starting a USA Western Cape Management Forum, and this seminar represents the start of this initiative. Marty Sport is also planning to host similar seminars at approximate 10-day intervals, pending the availability of speakers, and the topics will range from the use of sport technology, sport expertise and leadership, the future of university sport in a virtual world, as well as esports and more. So before I hand over to our speaker this morning, Ilham, we would like to make this morning's session an interactive one. And so in doing so, we're going to initially just gauge the views of our participants on two questions. And we will facilitate this via a quick online survey using Mentimeter. And so for now, to start off, I'm going to ask my colleague Grant van Velden to just share his screen, and we'll quickly run you through the process. You can either use your mobile phone or just your normal web browser like Google Chrome or Internet Explorer. And you simply go to the address www.menti.com. That's MENTI. So it's a very simple page. You go there and then you will enter the code that you now see at the top of your screen there. That's 802380. And once you do that, you will see those two questions posed there. And you can answer them essentially on a sliding scale from 1 to 4. First question being, I help others to understand my vision through the use of tools such as images, stories, and models. So the degree to which you do that in your own environment. And then the second question being, does COVID-19 have an impact on your feeling of control, on your time and future path? So again, that's a personalized question. Answer that on a scale from 1 to 4. And we'll start seeing those bars moving as the answers and responses come in. We'll be discussing this towards the end of the session during the question time, so we're not going to focus on the results now. But please complete that over the next couple of minutes. The option will remain active. But for now, we're going to start moving to the formal part of the session. So I thank Grant. He can unshare his screen again, and I'll quickly introduce Ilham. So the formal component of this morning's session will last for approximately 30 minutes. There will be time for questions at the end, but feel free to pose these questions in the chat bar on the side during the course of the session. I will either direct those to Ilham during a presentation, but most probably at the end, once she has concluded. We'd like to ask that you please state your name and organization when posing those questions that I'll be monitoring throughout the session. And then at the end, if you want to just ask a question verbally, you can also just indicate that in the chat. and then we will give you the opportunity to also just activate your camera at that point, so we keep it nice and interactive. So I think that's most of the formalities out of the way. I'm going to now hand over to our speaker for this morning, the Chief Director of Multisport, Ms. Ilham Groenewald, and we look forward to hearing what she has to say. Over to you, Ilham.
Thank you very much, Gustav, for the introduction, and I'd like to also thank our colleagues for joining us. I've been doing quite a bit of reading and research on leadership, and in particular transformational leadership, because I think that the lockdown has put us into a different space and requires us to lead and manage differently. And I hope that, as Gustav said, that this will be an interactive session and that I look forward to your engagements. So my presentation will look at an introduction, the dimensions of transformational leadership, characteristics and attributes. What about transformational leadership in the sport industry, the role of leadership during a crisis time, and the impact of COVID-19 on sport, and then how do we respond to a pandemic such as COVID-19? And then I will have some concluding remarks, and we'll have a question and answer session at the end of my presentation. Gustav, I'd like to take the opportunity to indicate to you as the moderator that if at any point of the presentation there is a burning question or comment, I'm quite comfortable for you to manage that throughout the course of the presentation.
Noted.
So colleagues, I think we've all been through different levels and high levels of uncertainty. We felt times of urgency and sometimes even have a bit of negative morale. And these we can attest to various reasons. Many of us needed to settle in and become teachers because the school program has been disrupted. We needed to manage and lead our teams differently. We needed to settle in very quickly so that we can get to know and learn how certain technologies work. So all of this can have a different impact on every single one of us. I believe that the role of transformational leadership is important because it can avoid situations of reduction in productivity. There are outcomes of poor employee retention. We've seen the various channels of media that people have lost their jobs. People are uncertain whether they're going to return to their jobs, and there's been a massive increase in financial problems and challenges. However, we also know that companies and organizations do bounce back from a crisis, and they're even better than they were before. So we must all learn from our hardships, and we must look at how are we going to move forward. And it's really important that we regain and renew our confidence when we do return to the new normal. But what has been the difference between companies who thrive and those who crumble? It's called leadership. And so borrowed from the organizational psychology, the concept of transformational leadership has now been applied in sport just for over a decade. So not too much work, too much research has gone into the role of transformational leadership. And when I was doing my research, I couldn't find much articles or master's thesis or PhD thesis around this. But here and there were some universities that had information available, but not necessarily related to sport. In other areas, such as production, where people look at the economics in detail. But as I said, nothing related to sport, and in particular, university sport. So what are the dimensions of transformational leadership? So this topic has been coming a long way. Bas in 1985 identified 4 dimensions, being growth, and this relates to the development of leaders, that there needs to be a high level of authenticity, and if you want to lead the way, you need to know the way. There has to be a vision. As leaders, we have a responsibility to inspire our team. Important that we align with the mission, and in this instance, applicable to university sport is to align to the university's mission. But if you look at local government, national government, etc., international federations, one can also align your vision to that level. Creativity is key. We need to inspire people to become creative, and creativity becomes successful when we decentralize decision making. In general, we do not like being micromanagement. We don't like micromanagement, but in some instances you are exposed to it. And the most important part that I want to highlight here is that how do we make sure that there is intrinsic motivation? Colleagues, my apologies. I think I'm having some connectivity. It's just come up on my screen. There we go. There's been more research done as early as 2018, and this is a group of people at different expertise that come together, and they've held many conferences, and they develop a guide where they look at the dimensions of transformational leadership and basically added different aspects to it. Again, the issue of vision stands out quite clearly. And in this instance, it relates to the understanding of where the organization is moving towards, the direction of the team. Are we all moving into the correct direction, the same pace? And do we understand a long-term horizon towards which the team needs to work? The second dimension speaks about intellectual stimulation, and I believe that this is very much applicable to the lockdown period. And we need to challenge each other. We need to constantly ask questions. We must be curious. And more importantly, the basic assumptions about our work. Because I think most of us have been in the sport management, sport administration space for a while. And one can become used to how we're doing things. And again, COVID-19 has been a huge wake-up call for every single one of us. Inspirational communication. I can admit to you that communication and formal communication and sending memorandums and sending reports, and I think it's a task that not all of us enjoy, but sometimes it's a necessary task. And the question is, when we talk about transformational leadership and inspirational communication, what does that mean? We need to inspire the pride amongst the team. We need to continue to say the positive things. It doesn't matter how bad it is at home. You know, the challenges that we have internally, when we go outside, when we step outside of our workplaces and the various environments, we need to remember the vision, why we have the vision, and therefore remain positive. It is very important to inspire passion and motivation. A couple of weeks ago, we had our internal presentations around operational excellence. And one of the key questions that came up was, what does this mean in lieu of your vision, you know, your values, and what inspires you? And transformational leadership talks a lot about this. My response to my colleagues were that in a space like a university, you know, that's bombarded by a governance system with a lot of red tape, sometimes that part gets there's a demotivation that can come into the folds, but that is something that we need to unpack a little bit further. Supportive leadership is key. The consideration of personal feelings, the thought of others' personal needs, and do we care about individuals' interests? Now, this speaks about empathy and to an extent, you know, your emotional intelligence as a leader. And I can tell you from a personal point of view, I struggle in this space. And it's got to do with the history and being a female in a male-dominated space, and there are different arguments attached to this. But I'm quite open to my team about issues related to empathy, but I think it speaks to your role and the purpose of transformational leadership, as I will explain to you a bit later on. There can be change. Personal recognition. How many times do we identify and acknowledge good work or just a bit of quality in good work? The personal compliments for individuals and their outstanding work. It doesn't always have to be in a formal setup. I think from an organizational point of view, and at Stellenbosch University, we've also spoken a lot about incentives, and I think that's something that a lot of improvement is necessary. And I think in sport we do have different opportunities to further explore that. Some characteristics and attributes. Again, from the same research, organizations and teams with transformational leaders obtain better business results. So they've surveyed hundreds of leaders, and these are the three characteristics and attributes that they've identified. Transformational leadership is a predictive factor in organizational performance, with high-performing teams having leaders with the strongest transformational leadership traits. Strong transformational leaders also create a good work climate and culture for the teams. And I think it's very important with the employees reporting to the highest employee growth. And because if you take care of people, if you decide to walk with them on that personal development journey, it cannot just end there. You have to look at their growth, and I mean, we're familiar with promotion. And it has to be a sustainable one, because you have to have a succession plan to enable you to achieve that objective. So what does this mean for sport? Danica Johnson is a psychologist, and I think I'm telling you what we all know. In sport, change is inevitable. It requires adaptation and survival in the ever-changing sport industry. Every year, there are coaching, administrative personnel, rule changes at various levels of sport organizations. And so what is it that we need to do when we talk about transformational leadership? We need to create depth within the organization. And there are three things that she lists: relationship, diversity, and servanthood. And servanthood is the constant reminder about the role of sport, that we are here to serve. So when you take up a leadership position, you are here to serve. And it's also important that we care about the needs, the motives, and the values of our staff, and we look at developing them into the leaders of tomorrow. This is necessary, especially in an industry where we know that change is unavoidable, and it sometimes happens very spontaneously. So what are some of the focus areas that we need to take into consideration? Especially now during COVID-19, it is about creating a safe environment, because we've all moved onto the virtual platforms. We need to understand what works for virtual communication. I'm sure my fellow colleagues who have also been engaging with their teams via the different virtual platforms can agree with me that sometimes you just have that silence happening where nobody says anything. And I always ask, or I always would make a comment and say, silence. It happens. We mustn't forget that, what is it, 50 days almost? We've been forced into a space, and some things have been enforced almost upon us, so that we're able to learn quickly, and learning, and especially if you talk about a learning organization, it's something that happens gradually over a long period of time. But COVID-19's impact has just requested and required of us to do things completely different. The feedback is critical, and this is where mentorship, coaching, talking about personal development plans, and sometimes we must understand that our colleagues, some of them are very okay and open to talk about it, and some of them are not. And the question is, what is your role as a leader? How are you going to transform yourself into that space to be able to make the difference? So the role of leadership during crisis times, such as COVID-19. There was a study done, and three things again: seek team members' ideas. And this gives you an opportunity to create solutions, to be innovative, increase the brain power. Because colleagues, I took some time the other day to understand, as sport administrators and leaders and managers, what our the core functions that we attend to within the context of our core business. And I believe that at least 60% of our time we spend in dealing with athletes and coaches and looking after facilities and attending meetings and writing reports, etc. And 40% of our time we ought to look at our personal development. We ought to look at thinking about new business ideas. So what now about the 60%? What are we going to do about the 60% that's no longer as active as it used to be 50 days ago? And this is where the increasing of the brain power and the opportunity to develop stronger teams is absolutely an opportunity for all of us to think about. Empathy is important when there's stress and strain, and it's important to acknowledge the distress. Again, not easy for all of us. The authentic communication I mentioned earlier on. And to keep on reminding ourselves that it's tough, but we are all in this together. We need to encourage our colleagues to ask for help. So you need to meet certain deadlines. You're struggling with some issues, so it's about emotional support. Because at the end of the day, each and every one of us do have responsibility to get us all back on track. And what is required from us as leaders? We need to be mentally strong. Easier said than done. And I think we look at the impact of COVID-19 and everything that's happening behind the scenes, and what's going to happen post-December. When do we reach level 1? And I believe now we have the time to even build a stronger team culture, so that we are even better prepared to weather any future other storms that we might encounter. However, I do want to place emphasis on the fact that I think it's critical for all team members to also be involved in this. It cannot just be a one-way process, because sometimes there's other levels of line functions that we as managers report to, and sometimes we share some of it and sometimes we don't. And perhaps the exploring transformational leadership will allow us to get out of this space and become a little bit more uncomfortable to ask the relevant questions. So what has been the impact of COVID-19? What does this mean for sport? I'm going to start with rules and regulations, but also add issues around protocols, guidelines, etc. For me, one of the areas, 3 of the areas that I believe the impact of COVID-19 should and allow us to think differently. The rules of the game. The other day I had an interview with Netwerk 24, and they asked me a question about contact sport and will rugby players in future have to wear masks and gloves? And I said, absolutely, that's possible. Depends on how COVID-19 decides to treat us. The role of medical staff, critical. We know that the World Health Organization provided us with guidelines, but we need to take those guidelines and make sense of it within our own spaces, our own environments, because ultimately the people that we serve are different. Although they are student athletes, they are athletes, we work with community members, there's definitely differentiating factors that we will have to take into consideration. So that's the second one. The third one relates to our work as sport managers and administrators. Technology, I've placed it right in the center, but let me talk to you first about skills, knowledge, training and experience. I'm going to mention again the 60%. What are we doing with that time currently? We know that we are also being bombarded by online learning, online teaching opportunities, and we must take this opportunity. More importantly, is to get out of our comfort zones and learn about areas not necessarily related to sport administration and management, but areas that currently and in future will even have a far bigger impact on our environment. And we must make sure that we look at readiness of our staff, of our students, our coaches, our support teams, and it means we need to look at training, we need to bring in the respective experience and expertise, and we need to go and call on the knowledgeable people so that we are able to develop our skills to look at a new normal and be able to respond to a new normal. Fan engagement. What are we going to do to make sure that we are able to fill our stadiums with thousands of supporters again? I don't know if I'm going to feel comfortable enough in the next couple of months, pending the situation, to go and sit right amidst thousands of people, not knowing, what has been done to ensure that whichever stadium I'm visiting, it's secure, it's safe, and I'm going to be okay. How are we going to engage our fans? Because we cannot lose our fan base. We know that, for example, in Varsity Cup, varsity sport, that is what's bringing the gees, the excitement and the vibe that drives our various teams so that they do better. Fans have the ability to help console our athletes. Various positive aspects around fans, and we need to find ways to deal with this. Now, Nielsen Sports have been speaking to us about this for a number of years, and I think we have to now start to focusing on this a lot more so that the new norm, that we are ready for the new norm. And then, of course, many of us have been working in the last couple of weeks assessing the impact on our businesses. We are looking at risk mitigation plans. We're looking at the impact of people, human resources, finances, etc. And it's important that we do that. But this, what we're currently dealing with, it's so fluid. In the next 2 days, things can change. And the question is, how ready are we? Right in the middle is technology, colleagues. I believe that, for me, we've been underestimating the role of technology and what it can play and what it should play. Data analytics has become a big buzzword. The question is, how much have we done about it? The other day, I had a chat with my colleague Liz and Grant, and we were speaking about how are we going to allow ourselves to be ready during the new normal, and various applications and the role of technology is key in this. So we need to find new ways and new means to make sure that we continue with our businesses, that we are sustainable, and because of social and physical distancing, technology will be key, and we need to become a lot more savvy around the usage of technology within our spaces. So how do we respond to a pandemic? Dr. Mone Mostert, he's with Stellenbosch University and recently appointed to the Institute for Future Research. I've attended a couple of his sessions, brilliant brain power. He takes you out of your comfort zone. He challenges you, but he has the ability to understand your space and share with you what are some of the things for you to consider. So what he said, he highlighted 5 themes and how we should respond to the pandemic that we face today, and they are reclaim and reframe. So what does this mean for sport? We've lost almost 10 months of sport for the year. We don't know what's going to happen in 2021. And we need to sit down and think, how are we going to reclaim our space? Obviously, based on the previous slide that I've just presented to you, and the need that we need to reframe the sport environment. I was privileged to be part of a webinar with the Global Sport Institute at Arizona State University, and they spoke about resetting the button. various issues came up, and we looked at commercial sport, amateur sport, youth sport, community sport, universities, schools. Now, what does it mean to reset the button? And it's within that framework that I think, even within the South African context, we need to understand where to from here over the next 5 years. That's where that vision is important. We must make sure that we stimulate ourselves intellectually so that we're able to reclaim and reframe sport moving forward. The new emerging civilization speaks about the well-being. So I raised the point and said to the panel members and the participants of the webinar, the reality for South Africa is that sport for some people are not that important. What is more important is, where am I going to get my next plate of food from? Where am I going to sleep tonight? Do I have a blanket? If I find myself sleeping under a bridge. And so for us, the new emerging civilization and the role of sport is about the well-being. So is this an opportunity for us to reset the button and think about the role of sport in South Africa? And I don't have the answers for you. It's a question that I'm posing, and something that I think we have to find an opportunity to unpack and spend a lot of time. Because if we don't take note of an impact of COVID-19, then I think we've just been lingering around for the last 50 days. The issue of climate emergency, I can just imagine how much more healthier the air is outside, because all of the factories closed down. All of the production plants closed down for a while. So we definitely have to talk about environmental awareness. A typical example I want to use is the readiness of our sport facilities. How do we manage waste when we build new facilities? How environmentally friendly are these facilities? When we know about the power outages that we've had for a very long time. Just 2 years ago, we had drought, serious drought, various places in South Africa. And as sport people, it's important that we think about these. We need to rethink our access to finance, because as we begin to think about the new normal, we might just be moved into the space where we need to reassess how we allocate our budgets. It's critical that we focus on youth and making sure that they have the required skills. With the impact of COVID-19, if I remember correctly, we had already then over 10 million people unemployed. In the recent weeks, probably more than 3 million people lost their jobs or are due to lose their jobs. And a high percentage of that unemployment group are our youth. University sport as an opportunity to unpack this. And we can't do this alone. We need to work with schools and we need to work with communities. But that is basically what the Institute for Future Research has identified. So why transformational leadership? I think it allows us to do something that you are curious about. It allows us to develop new things, new models, test our ideas. And we need to do this on the basis of understanding what's happening around the world. And if we want to think about the future, we know that globalization has been here for a very long time. We need to understand the role of sport, and in this context, our education sport. It's also a great time to experiment and try and do new things, but it's not easy. I've always had the feeling that to experiment and be innovative in a university environment is not the easiest thing. However, perhaps this is where transformational leadership can make a difference and should make a difference. I believe that we all can move into a space of transformation. And perhaps in my concluding remarks, I can share some of the reasons why I believe that that is possible. So there are a number of areas that we need to consider, and a lot of homework that we should be doing if we believe that transformational leadership can help us to make a difference, especially moving into the new normal. There are various online assessments available for us to look at where we are as individuals. And lots of guides available, colleagues. And what we need to focus on is that those 5 dimensions that I've mentioned to you, each one of those dimensions require us the need to know. So we need to go and do a lot more research around certain areas, equip ourselves, ask our coaches, our mentors. We need to look at good practice behaviors. What has worked previously, not necessarily in sport, because as I've indicated, the research around sport and transformational leadership is very minimal. What are the tools that will help us to do better? What are the things that we need to avoid? So I think that those are important points for us to consider. And I didn't cover this in my presentation because hopefully you'll take the time to do some homework and equip yourself around transformational leadership. So I read an article on the Harvard Business Review, the online version, and the research looked at what do some of the best transformational leaders do. They strategically pursue 2 separate journeys. What does this mean? Success requires repositioning our core business whilst we're actively looking at the growth of the business. You've got to ensure that your day-to-day functioning happens. But on the other hand, what are the new opportunities? I've just shared with you the Institute for Future Research and what their thoughts are. And possibly there are areas of growth that we can consider in that space. They use culture change to drive engagement. And this, they indicate, also require a culture of risk-taking and exploration. So how many of us on a daily basis, thinking that you're in your normal space of work or even at home, how many of us explore and take the risk? How many of us are prepared to do something and later on say, I'm sorry, I've done it before, but I don't think I do it on a regular basis. However, whilst we're exploring new things, taking the risk, I think we need to remain focused and drive our core values. And we all know what this includes. We strive for service of excellence. We're working towards a team environment, team culture. It's important that we hold each other accountable and that we need to have fun. How many times you go around, have a good laughter, share a joke, don't take life so serious. Because after all, I believe that all of us decided to accept this particular position where we find ourselves currently in because we love what we do. These leaders communicate powerful narratives about the future. It's your responsibility. You need to create the reality of what the future holds. You need to help build, you need to build teams, plans, with the help of your teams for the organization, so that as you begin to outline these realities, that the role of transformational leadership is to take the team along. But we also know that some of the reality checks are that you're not going to have every single team member, as the phrase say, being on the same page. And when you go and do your own research around transformational leadership, that's where it becomes key. It's not an easy task. because there's also the transactional leadership. And I think on a daily basis, we get so bogged down by that transactional leadership that you have an event, you must do the checklist, you have a meeting, where's the agenda, do I have the minutes ready for the meeting, etc., etc. Those things must happen. But in our quest to do things different, to be able to function within a space of a new normal, I think that it is critical that as leaders that we begin to understand what the future holds and how do we bring the team along with us. These leaders develop a roadmap before the disruption takes hold of our environment. Now, I don't think that we did this in the case of COVID-19. I mean, the other day we were still busy with strategic plans, operational plans, and this and that. And guess what? At my university, the rector came back and he said there are only 2 focus areas for the year. He was very clear. The rest of the things are not happening. Number 1, we must conclude the academic year successfully. Number 2, it is about the sustainability of your various environments, and therefore we're currently looking at mitigation plans and looking beyond 2020, etc. So my question to you is, colleagues, in conclusion, how will we differentiate ourselves in the higher education sport environment for the betterment of the South African sport industry? Because we have our colleagues who have joined us who are not employed in the higher education sport environment, and therefore I'm adding the part for the betterment of South African sport industry. Is transformational leadership necessary or applicable for us to reach this outcome? I think I have not read enough and explored enough to give you a definitive response, but I think I'm confident that every single one of us at some point of our lives go through a transformation. And for me, COVID-19 is definitely one of those moments. So thank you very much for listening to my presentation, and I will now hand over to Dr. Gustav Venter. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you very much, Ilham. We would now like to certainly hear from some of our participants, and so we're going to move over to the interactive component of the session. Ilham, perhaps you can just unshare your screen at this point, and then I'm going to ask Grant to just reshare his screen again for our little survey that we did at the beginning. That we'll just reflect on in a moment. In the meantime, if anyone has a question, please either post the question in the chat on the right-hand sidebar, or just indicate that you want a turn to talk. Then I will give you the opportunity to direct that question to Ilham. So please use the chat option for that. Perhaps while we digest the results of the survey, we'll turn to that in a moment. I will start off just with a question to Ilham from my side. Ilham, the overall sort of sense around COVID-19 has been essentially negative. I mean, we've been, in multiple weeks of sort of a low mood nationally, globally, a lot of negativity. From your perspective, what are some of the positives, if any, that have emerged during this process, especially thinking around sport? What would be the most significant positives from this whole sort of crisis going forward? Ilham, perhaps just, I think you're still muted on the sound, so just, there we go.
My apologies. So I think it's giving us an opportunity to pause. We know that the sport environment is an extremely busy environment. Sometimes we don't even take the time to have a cup of coffee or have lunch. We work very long hours. Well, I think some of us have been working longer hours during COVID-19, but you have an opportunity to manage your day differently. And that's where the pause button comes in. You have an opportunity to do different things, doing research, identify an area that yet you've been struggling for a while, and the question is how can you make this better? From my experience with the online check-ins with the staff and the different themes that we've used, I believe that we're getting to know each other better. We're sharing things, we're dealing with engagements that we haven't really done this before. We know that at Kutsenberg and the university, our facilities are quite apart. The same for other campuses where they have different universities where they have different campuses. So COVID-19 gives us an opportunity to, for me, that's key, the whole aspect of people and how we can do things differently, and the area of skills and development around that.
Right. We have a number of colleagues from other universities also present in the seminar, so we'd love to hear from some of you. As we can see, the question results, most individuals indicated that they are using tools such as images, stories, and models to help convey their vision. Perhaps a couple of our other colleagues can comment on how they do that in their own respective spaces. So we see the weighting there, if we look at that sort of distribution, most people on the positive side. And then the second question, in terms of the feeling of control over your time, whether there's a feeling of loss there. It's sort of a very similar distribution. I mean, Elam, you've mentioned the sort of high reliance on electronic and technological communication. So perhaps if any of our colleagues would like to comment on their own views on these responses, and perhaps how they themselves framed these questions, we'd be happy to hear that. So please feel free to post your question, or just indicate that you'd like to have a chat on the sidebar. I think one of the things, just from a personal perspective, also that the crisis has forced us to consider has basically unveiled is the interconnected nature of the economy, and also the sports economy. I mean, we talk about it a lot, and it seems fairly obvious, but now when you think about something like hairdressers, for example, being shut down due to the lockdown, etc., it's an interesting time for reflection, and it really shows you how everything is connected. That's just one thing that stood out to me. I'm not seeing any questions on the right-hand side yet. There we go. Nomsa, please activate your camera and mic. You're welcome to make a comment.
Thank you. Can I not share my camera? My hair is a mess, just like
that's fine. We're not going to force you.
Well, maybe let me just be brave enough and just show off my new hairstyle. Anyway, thank you very much for hosting us, Matis. I think the comment I want to make is the positive out of COVID-19. I think it has pushed all of us globally to finally start using technology much more effectively, because I think in the past, if there was no COVID-19, this conversation would have happened face to face, and that in itself would have cost each one of us some sort of money to make it to that particular venue. So I think out of this, we need to prepare ourselves for the new normal. And I think as we are all sitting here, we are grappling with the issue, what is the new normal? What is the new normal going to look like? So I think, Elam, as you spoke of transformational leadership this morning, it requires each one of us to become a true transformational leader so that we are agile enough to be able to respond to what the day would bring. Because as I sit here, I don't know what the president is going to announce on Friday, and we all don't know when we're going to go back to campus. So it requires us, it's like each day you have to find a better way of navigating your day and managing it, depending on what happens. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nomsa. We've also got a question in the chat from Anza Ramatia, thanking Elam and the panel. And then the question to you, Elam, is how did you decide on the use of transformational leadership as a strategy to combat the challenges posed by the pandemic? And then related to that, what other leadership strategies have you identified that could assist during these times?
No, thank you for the question. So I'm going to refer back to the 5 dimensions. And about a year ago, I did a 360 review on leadership with my coach. And there were a number of areas identified as areas of development. And, I always thought that my empathy levels are very minimal. But thank goodness that outcome of the survey gave me a better perspective. And so I went back to that survey and the outcomes. Like I said, I took the time to think about my experience, and I used to write poems, and I used to write short stories, and that stopped a couple of years ago. And guess what? I started to do that. I started to write down my experiences on a weekly basis, and it made me realize that there's been a change, and change means that you are transforming. And I needed to understand, what does this mean for me? So I started to just read broadly. I started with leadership, and I've obviously we know of transformational leadership, but understanding the detail of it. So it was really for me to start with myself as a person, because it is not easy to manage a team of people close to 100. It is not easy for us to just accept the cancellation of activities of 30 sport codes. And I needed to find the balance to manage myself and manage the team. And on a daily basis, I do learn and I have challenges. So that's the reason why I decided to choose transformational leadership. Like I said, we need. There are other areas of styles of leadership, charisma. That's one aspect that's required, and some leaders are absolutely brilliant at that. Transactional leadership, as I've mentioned, transformational leadership, and then you have the people that are just pure visionaries. They go, they drive the vision, and they are just tough. Some of us do have a combination of those leadership styles. So I think all of these leadership styles are applicable. The question is, how do you combine them so that you ultimately, achieve your outcomes?
Thanks, Ilham. We've also got a comment incoming from Mr. Ball. You're welcome to take the floor.
Thanks very much, Gustav. And yeah, Mr. Ball's actually my dad, so just a side note. Thanks very much, Ilham and the Marty Sport team for this presentation, and also for inviting us other side of the Boerewors curtain to join in today. I think there's a few things that came to mind when Ilham was talking around transformational leadership, and the things that stood out for me, it's very much about how our mind is shaped and the way we then do things post that thinking that we have. But I also want to plant two other sort of leadership thoughts that I think also are very applicable along with this transformational leadership concept, and that is around the authentic leadership, which I think Ilham already touched on. And I think there for me, it's about our value systems, both personal and in the organization, and the why we do things. I think that has also become a lot more prevalent in these times. And then the second one is around responsible leadership. So what are we looking at in terms of not only the bottom line, but also the social and the environmental, along with the economical impacts that we have as leaders. So I think those two concepts of authentic and responsible needs to be looked at the same time as we're also looking at transformational.
Thank you for those comments. I'm also going to give an opportunity for Mandla to comment. Go ahead, Mandla.
Oh, thank you, sir. I think, firstly, I think a big lesson that has come out of this situation is, especially for us as leaders, is it has forced us in a way to first think on our toes, and secondly, to be more open with our teams. Because I think Ilham did say it politely earlier, to say sometimes we get information from higher places or anywhere, and we always choose how to share it. But what I've said, I've learned now, because of the way we communicate, we have become more transparent and more willing to share information, not only with our teams, but even with people that we know that we are in partnership with. And also, in a way, we are being forced now to think outside of the traditional sports. Now, we've been talking a lot about the e-gaming and all other things, and we used to be philosophical about it. And now the COVID-19 has brought it home that we really need to start to seriously think about other alternatives to sport. And things that will make us remain sustainable and also relevant. Because not to have traditional sport for 10 months is going to have a huge impact. Yes, the positive might be that people will come back more hungry to play sport and more hungry to watch sport. But if we were proactive enough to have other alternatives to traditional sport, we would still be saying sport does happen even during COVID-19. Thank you.
Thank you, Mandla. Yes, I think it's a fine balance. Some sport codes might even feel a little bit threatened by the rise of the sort of electronic use of sport or conducting of sport. I'm just thinking of Formula One, who's been amazing in terms of running these online Grand Prix. Now that's obviously sanctioned by Formula One itself. They've been kind of at the forefront of this. But I've also detected some federations maybe being a little bit tentative over possible consumer behavior after this. So it's going to be very interesting to see how that plays out. I'm going to give Trish a chance to comment now before we go to a couple of questions that are also in the chat. So Trish, please go ahead.
Hi. Sorry. Thank you very much, Ilan. More sessions, food for thought. This really speaks to your points about repositioning core business, creating a change culture, and I think also to Crystal's comments. A lot about this COVID-19 and what has happened globally is people needing to take sort of rethink of the absolute core values of how we've been living. So if you take an organization, all of us as leaders, managers, anybody in charge of a team has always striven for more and more and more and more. We're looking for a trajectory. And I think what COVID is doing is saying, just stop. And I think this speaks to press the reset button. Stop with the more. More people in the stadia, more competitions, more teams. And let's start looking at quality rather over quality. Quantity. And then this also obviously is going to speak hugely to how we monitor and evaluate. But I think for me, that what reset the button actually means is actually clear the playing fields and actually reposition and start again. And especially, I think this is important in sport. Thank you.
Thank you, Trish. In the meantime, we also had a question from Dumisani around whether intellectual stimulation on transformational leadership is only for those in the higher positions. I think, Ilham, you've already responded to that, indicating that it's for everyone in the organization and basically needs to be managed in line with an organizational plan. We have a question from Crystal. So, Ilham, perhaps you can respond to this one. In our new environment, what will it look like to reset the button? So it ties a little bit to what Trish has been saying. What does it look like to press that button, and how do we get the various sport leaders in all sectors of sport in South Africa to buy into the reset? So it's really a question around the broader landscape. So Ilham, if you'd like to respond to that one.
Okay, so Nomsa spoke about being agile, and that's exactly what we need to do. So the terminology that we used to, that refers to short-term, medium-term, long-term plans, I ask myself the question, are those still relevant? Because just look what happened to us. We had these plans in place and boom, they mean nothing right now. For sport, we have to think about physical distancing. These are things that you're all aware of. We need to think about how we work together as people. So it starts with leadership. So the competitive nature, the question is this still applicable, or do we come together and we find collective solutions? So should cricket, rugby, netball, hockey, athletics have separate meetings? USA, should we all sit in the same meeting and talk about what does this resetting of the button means? The issue around logistical support for our teams, it's a different food for thought right now for us. Implementation thereof, again, I said this is a very fluid situation. So 6 months from now, we might have a cure, but what does that mean? This morning when I had a consultation with my doctor, it was a telephonic consultation, and I was asked permission to be charged a consultation fee. It's different. It's never happened before. I think the specific role around the day-to-day work that we do, that's what I'm referring to. It's definitely not going to be business as usual. And, you know, and the sectors within South African sport, how do we buy in? How do we support each other? A reminder that all of this is new for every single one of us. So sometimes, you know, when you read the news, you follow the news, you see people demanding quick answers. That is what social media has done. Quick turnaround time, demanding, stressful, all sorts of impact on people. And when we think about the impact of COVID-19, I'm saying we've got the rest of the year to be able to find each other, to create a new vision, to unpack and understand what are the skills, what are the expertise required for us to be able to thrive within a new normal environment. And I think more importantly, because this is a critical point for South Africa, more so than for other countries, but considering the economic impact, I mean, they could just find themselves back in the same space. You know, the resource support. We have to go and sit down and think differently. Nomsa spoke about the use of technology. Do you know that SASCOC, they probably spent close to R500,000 just to host one meeting? And that's a lot of money. Do we still need to do that? So I think as a sport industry, we have to reset the button, and we've got to, and we have to be able to tap into what I refer to as the intellectual stimulation. Find the people that have the skills. Don't sit in a meeting and wanting to think about the work or do the work that a medical doctor should be doing. There are people in our spaces that have been dealing with, you know, crisis impact, and we need to reach out to them and ask them to help us. So that's how I think we should be resetting the button.
Thanks, Ilam. We also had a comment in the meantime from Shamila. Our new normal involves coming to terms with and learning to live with COVID-19 because, you know, as she says, most indicators are that it's not going away, at least anytime soon. Our sporting narratives have to focus on how we can do this, particularly with contact sporting codes. And she keeps visualizing your comment around the rugby players with masks, and then asks how will we use our new normal to make this work in terms of contact sport. So Ilam, I don't know if you maybe temporarily want to put your SA rugby hat on and maybe just comment on the contact sports space.
I don't know. There's no answer for it. So if you go and have a look at the World Rugby guidelines that they've developed, I think they do look at issues of physical, social distancing, safety and security of everyone, whether in the gyms, the training fields, etc. They're also looking at traveling and accommodation, and what does this mean, training programs, small groups, bigger groups, individuals, etc. They're looking at the role of medical staff, and I must say South Africa has been very involved in developing those guidelines and protocols. So no decisions have been made in the personal protective equipment is something that must be developed and prescribed with the consultation of medical staff. I mean, that was emphasized quite clearly. When I was asked the question, I said, absolutely, that might be a possibility. Because until such time that we find a cure, there's a lot of pressure for sport to go ahead, you know, behind closed doors. And what does that mean? I mean, should we be irresponsible and not allow players to wear a mask or gloves? Now, here, you know, the issue of gloves, I also thought about it, Shamila. This is the role of technology. I think somebody will be coming up with a very fancy idea of a set of gloves that contact sport athletes can use, not slippery, you know, they're still able to grab the woman or the man. So their technology will play a role.
Thanks, Ilam. We've got a comment incoming from Sean. So Sean, you're welcome to take the floor.
Thank you, Gustav. Welcome, colleagues. I know it's close to the end, and thank you, Ilam. I'll just quickly show my face. That is who I am. I just want to make two comments. The first is what I've just happening in my own space, talking about school. We all want sport to go back But I think sometimes the one conversation we're not having is giving athletes the choice whether they want to come back. So there's always a risk in terms of how they measure their own readiness to go back to sport. And I think it's a dual conversation, to have the game open, but also to have everybody willing to participate. That was the one. And then in terms of leading our teams back into the workspace when we return to a new normal, I think mental health is very important in this time, and the support needed to look after staff from the top right down to the bottom. How well they are prepared to come back to work, leaving their families at home, their own situation at home, etc., their own financial knock that they might have taken, their reintegration and so forth. So I would just strongly suggest, as Ilham said, get the specialists in. We are not all psychologists. Some of us are parents, so we have some skills, but I think each and every staff member will need as much as possible support in that space to stay strong as we go back.
Thanks, Sean, for raising those important points. We've also had a couple of additional comments. One from Crystal, just pointing to organizational culture and how the pandemic is now forcing organizations to really reevaluate their organizational culture. Some cultures, especially in government, have been around forever, and now it is hitting hard that those cultures are not in line with where we are and the future environment. So thanks, Crystal, for that comment, really speaking to the sort of changes that the pandemic is forcing at an overall level. And then another comment around the rights of the player, turning back to the contact sport situation. These are major considerations within the return to play, compete and train. Where are those ethical lines versus enforcement of contracts, agreements, and employment? So again, just speaking to the overall number of complications that various environments are dealing with as a result of COVID-19. We've just reached over the hour mark, so I'm going to give a final opportunity to any final questions that our participants would like to field. If you'd like to use that final opportunity, that's going to be now. And just as a final note of business, please, if as many people as possible can actually activate their cameras just temporarily, we'd like to take a screenshot of the seminar and the participants. So you can do that now. Thanks, Sean. I see you there. I think I'm still in display. We've got a couple of other people. Trish is taking care of the photo. Maybe a couple of more. As I said, if anyone would like to field a final question, it doesn't look like it. So I think we've reached saturation point. So at this point, I'd like to just extend a big thank you to Ilham for the presentation, as well as everyone who's taken the time out of their busy schedules to attend this morning. I think it's a great example of how the sort of geographical distance is just being broken down as a result of the COVID crisis. And we certainly at Multisport look forward to having similar engagements with you in the coming weeks. So thank you very much for that. We wish you all a very good week further and dealing with all the various challenges in your environments. Thank you very much. Have a good morning. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Gustav. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Gustav. Thank you, Ilham.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, mate. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.